Welcome to the Just Ask podcast. My name is Becky Bridgham.
And I'm Jim Bridgham.
And we are both coaches and entrepreneurs and parents and married. And we decided to create a podcast where we would sit around in our bedroom, drinking wine and pulling questions out of a jar to answer the questions of our friends and our listeners. And the best part is you all ask the questions. So if you have any questions, go to the justaskpodcast.com and submit them there. But today we're going to talk about trust. And the question that was submitted was, how can trust in a relationship be built?
Okay. So I used to teach a class on trust, so I have a little bit of an edge on this question. And Stephen Covey wrote a book called Leading at the Speed of Trust. So if you want to build trust in your relationship or your workplace, this is a great place to start. The book is a little dry, but the course is spectacular. It all relies on two principles. So if you're taking notes or you're going around, you can think of these two things. So the first one's character. And the second one is competence. So what's character? So that's integrity, the motives you have, maybe the intent you have with people, but all of that's your character, who you are at your core. The competence piece is your capabilities. What can you do? What skills do you have? What are the results? And most importantly, what's your track record? So we're going to go through a few of those as we go, but I want to explore Becky's model, which is more of a kind of a metaphor for this. So what's your metaphor or the picture you have for building trust?
So when I think of trust and when I've broken trust with people who were important to me, this was the mental picture that I had in trying to regain it. And it's basically a mason jar or a jar of pebbles. And what happens is over time, every time you do something trustworthy or you do what you say you're going to do, or you're reliable, or you come through in a trustworthy way, you're putting pebbles in the jar. And unfortunately, when you break trust, that whole jar gets dumped, especially if it's something huge. Maybe if it's a little white lie, a couple pebbles might come out of the jar. But if it's a big issue, that jar is completely empty, which is hard to then refill. But part of the process of really building that trust is it's supposed to be hard. If you've done something that is unloving to your partner or to your child or to your boss or to your neighbor, to your best friend that has broken that trust, there honestly should be a little bit amount of work to regain it because you've hurt that person. You've broken that bond. And so starting from that empty jar, it's the little things. It's the little showing up as you say you are, following through with your word, doing the things that you say you're going to do, is those little pebbles. And every once in a while you might get in that big rock that feels like it fills that jar back up, but you need to be super careful to not dump it out again, because it's honestly kind of like losing weight. It's easier to gain it than it is to lose it. It's easier to lose trust than it is to gain it. So if this is an area that you're struggling in, just think about little pebbles. How can I show that I'm trustworthy in small little ways that hopefully then, as the partner or the friend or the boss can see that, then they feel that the weight of the trust, the jar gets heavier over time.
Yeah, and the pebbles you put in come from these two real bins. So that's the character and competence piece. And so if you think of character, so let's go back to the integrity you have. If you make a promise, do you keep it? And these are big promises and little promises. And if you ask my kids, I rarely ever promise anything. You can email them, text them right now. I will not promise them jack because I don't know what tomorrow's bringing. So I'll say maybe, probably, because even things that seemed quote unquote certain, where I'm like, oh, we are absolutely going to do this, the next day it's like a hurricane or a snowstorm and it doesn't happen. So I've learned just to say probably, most likely they'll occur. And so when they know, yes, when I say yes, we're doing something, they know we are doing it. Like that is part of integrity. So it isn't always the big things of like, well, I never lie. Like, well, everyone kind of doesn't tell the truth all the time. Not everybody follows the speed limit. Maybe you do. Congratulations, you are the only person. But that's examples of integrity. The motive you're doing something. Why are you doing it? Anybody can see through a fraudulent appearance or a fake person. You can see the motive. You know if someone's trying to sell you a vacuum, you know what it is. It's that motive of why they're doing it. Is it coming from a place of service or loving care or what, versus just duty, etc. And the final thing's intent with people. And this is all under character, right? So this is all under character. The intent with people. And there is a really totally B movie. So You should probably not go watch this because it's so hippie and so bad. But it's called the Prophecy. So it's kind of super hippie. It was on Amazon Prime. I was like on a plane ride, like, and I downloaded it and nothing else downloaded. So I saw it and it's really hokey, but there's a part in it where the dude is like trying to like almost seduce this girl, and you see this like red weird energy like you see in like a spiritual realm. And to me that shows like intent with people. Like, what's your intent? Is your intent to serve people, to become friends, or to be maybe a little skeevy or a little bit weird? So that's all under the character umbrella, and those are examples of pebbles you put in the jar. The other example is competence, and I think this is way more important, and I think we should address this just from a relational standpoint because we get so many questions on it. So under competence, you're thinking capabilities. What are you able to do? And this is really interesting because we may want to do something, but may not have the ability. Like, so you have to understand like what is your actual ability to do it. Like, so if you think of it, like I would love to go and lift 800 pounds in deadlift, right? I don't have that ability at this time. I could possibly develop it with enough drugs, but for now I'm not planning on doing drugs, just so you know. But the point of the story is I only have so much ability. So what's the capability you have and how can you grow it? The second one is skills. What skills do you have? Some people are better at relating than others. I know this week I've been working like intensely long hours. I know everybody else is home in the entire universe, but not me. I'm definitely not. And I'm exhausted by the time I get home. So I've been very, very direct with the kids and with Becky, and I'm like, this is where I'm at. This is how I'm responding. I need to go into my quiet zone because I am functionally exhausted. And like it was my day off and I worked 8.5 hours. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So just note, like, you have to use your skills where you're at. If you don't have the verbal skills or the knowledge of yourself on how to respond in that kind of situation where you're stressed out or under anxiety, go hide somewhere if you can. And I mean, if it's safe, your kids are safe, go hide. It's totally worth it to not explode. 2 more things I'll let Becky jump in is results and your track record. Those are kind of together. So if you're developing competence in your relationship or at work, what are the results you're getting? Everyone's going to make mistakes at first. So if you're just married or just in a relationship, dude, you're going to screw this stuff up like a champ. It's just what we do. But what's the track record? Is your track record one of success over time? So if you're new at this, your results like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. I messed up once, doing good on 8 of 9, let's say. But if your track record is you come home and you're a complete dick to your family all the time, guess what? That shows what your competence is, which means you have a low relational competence. You don't know how to do it. We're all going to mess up. I mess up all the time. More than one time, you can go ask my family where I've had to, not this week necessarily yet, but the week is young, where I've had to come in and say, hey, I'm really sorry for the way I addressed that. I should have said this, but this is why I did it. Please forgive me. Like, that has come out of my mouth so many times I can recite it. But the point is, it's a track record. So I'm going to review it. These pebbles, I'm going to let Becky ad-lib. I know I monopolized a bunch of time, but this is a really big area for me. So under character, this is your integrity, your motive, and your intent with people. That's character. The second one's competence. So character and competence. Competence is the capabilities, the skills, and then your results and track record. So Becky, all of this, these are all the pebbles you said to put in the jar. What other ways can people kind of develop trust?
I almost view it as, I'm the metaphor person, as
That's
a
great.
bank account.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's
one
good.
of the things that
Preach
we
it.
did with our children was we used a method called Love and Logic. And there's fantastic books out there. They actually have a Love and Logic Institute, which we didn't know existed until we were driving down the highway.
And there's
there was
a van.
a van with the Love and Logic Institute somewhere in Colorado,
That's so
which
weird.
is fantastic. But this book literally saved my mind when my kids were toddlers. And there's a few different ones, but the one that really helped me was, I think, called like Early Magic and Childhood, Love and Logic for Early Childhood. And it's all about asking your kids questions, which is ironic that our podcast is called the Just Ask podcast, because we're huge advocates for questions for your building a relationship. But with your children, I'm going to give you this example and then talk about how it relates to trust. So with your children, when you give them lots of options, you give them autonomy to choose things. So for example, you're like, do you want an apple or an orange with your breakfast? And they get to choose. Well, I want the apple, right? So they feel important. And you gave them 2 choices that were both wins for you. So then there's a time where if your kids don't want to wear their coats, do you want to wear your coat or carry your coat? Either way, it's a win for mom and dad, because if they're not cold, they're going to carry it. And if they're cold, they're going to put it on. So you give them all these little choices. Do you want macaroni and cheese or SpaghettiOs? And then you're basically filling their bank account, right? They have this autonomy. They feel powerful. They feel like they have a say in their life. And then every once in a while, you make a withdrawal and you say, hey, it's 8 o'clock. Mom and dad have given you so many choices today. And now it's my turn to give a choice. And I choose that bedtime is 8 o'clock. There's no more choices for you today. So in the realm of trust, when you're, having those little deposits every once in a while, when I just say like doing what you say you're going to do, being trustworthy with your partner, being trustworthy with your kids. And I love that Jim brought that in, that this is not just between spouses. This is if you say to the kids, yeah, we're going to get ice cream, and you don't follow through, you suck. Like, that's just not kind to your children, right? So don't make promises that you can't keep. But when you are depositing in, then every once in a while, if you have that moment of like, hey kids, I know I said that we were going to get ice cream. I'm totally exhausted. I promise we're going to do it tomorrow. They're going to be so much less likely to balk or be really hurt by that withdrawal because their tank is full. So if you have to take a little bit out of the jar every once in a while, if you have to take a little bit out of the deposit, that's okay. It's not always going to be you're starting with square one, but I feel like a huge component to all of this is communication. The more you can say to your partner, to your kids, that this is what you're trying. I remember we were going to sell Girl Scout cookies last weekend, which our daughter had a huge goal, which she did great. She didn't meet, but that was okay because she tried. And it was coming time to go do the Girl Scout booth. And I'm like, Samantha, go grab your vest. We got to go. She's like, I don't want to go. And I had to have this conversation. Like, when you say you're going to be somewhere, you've given your word, you need to show up. This is an element of trustworthiness. And so the same thing with our spouse. If we say we're going to be there, we need to be there. With our employer, if we say we're going to do it, we need to do it. And build that trust up over time. So when we do have that moment where you just can't make it, you just can't come through, that it's not quite so painful. It's not quite so hurtful.
Okay. So today we kind of went over the beads you put in the jar, right? So that's from the competence and character bucket. And then we also talked about making deposits, emotional deposits. I just actually tack on one thing before we wrap, is that if you've made a lot of promises that are broken with your kids, you need to start fixing it immediately, like right this second. This isn't something that you can just brush off and think, oh, it'll be fine. Like, there's actually significant damage that you're doing by making those promises, especially from men. There's a term called the wound of the father that happens psychologically, where all of us have something where a father figure, whether it's your dad or someone in your life who was like a father, said something of demeaning or made a promise that wasn't kept, that might have even seemed super minor to you. And it could have been something as trivial as ice cream, or we're going to get that toy and didn't happen, or something significant like, you're worthless, or I'm not going to bring you because you don't deserve it. Like those kind of terms where it goes to your worth and your core. That is something that needs to be repaired immediately. And if you've already done this and your kids are out of the house, they're 18 or older, ask for forgiveness and start speaking into their life. And if I had to recommend a book right now, this one also falls into the hokey category a little bit, but it's called The Blessing. It's really interesting. And I know this is kind of on a tangent from trust, but the book, The Blessing, goes at the Jewish culture, and it shows how on Sabbath evenings, the father of the house or the male of the house will go around and bless everyone and say, you're so great because of X. You're so great because you're such a great swimmer.
Oh my gosh, how
you're
powerful
a great smiler.
is that?
And so that's a great way to build trust. And I've noticed that even at work. Like, I have really minor things that happen this week that it's been ridiculous, but I've gone above and beyond to thank the people for what they've done. Very specifically, like, thank you for doing this. It made a big difference. I very much appreciate it. It took me less than 1 minute to write. Or like I mentioned before, I still am thanking the janitors everywhere that are cleaning all the stupid handles every 10 minutes. Like, I'm like, thank you for being here. Really appreciate what you're doing. Like, I can see the trust being built.
I think one thing to add is how specific you are. I think I work with a lot of women in business, and you get a lot of, you rock, you're awesome. How about, you did such a great job at fulfilling this thing you said you were doing. Like, being super specific for what you're being praised for means so much more than just you're so great.
Attaboy, yeah.
Because that feels shallow, right? It feels inauthentic. So I love that you're saying to pour those blessings on building the trust, but being specific with your words.
Well, and we hope this podcast has helped you today in getting some ideas to build trust and also some resources like Leading the Speed of Trust, which is again businessy but applies to home as well, or The Blessing is the other resource. But if there's anything you need to build trust, seriously ask, because or send another question in. This is a really important area for people, and it's something that lasts a lifetime. And you want to have relationships with your family that you can trust them forever. So it's definitely worth pursuing. So Becky, where should they send questions?
They can go to thejustaskpodcast.com.
Okay, and stay safe out there. We're praying for you guys. We're all going to get through the situation together, so just hang in tight.
Bye.
Bye.